Welcome to the first episode of Neowolf News. I'm your host, Neowolf. I was recently canceled on Facebook. In this episode, I'm going to talk about what I did to get canceled. Then I'm going to talk about the experiment that I did, starting new accounts. I started 4 new accounts, and I was able to get those canceled within 1 to 2 days. So I'm going to talk to you about how that went down. And then finally, what's next? In a world with more and more censorship, where do the people that value freedom of expression turn and find platforms that respect the freedom of speech? So stay tuned, we're going to get right into it. So what did I do to get censored? At first I wasn't sure. I didn't remember getting a first strike. So I had to look back at my account and look to see when was the first strike. And I saw that I had gotten the strike in the middle of the summer during the height of the pandemic, when the CDC had revised their numbers to more accurately represent how many people had died due to the virus and how many people had died due to other contributing factors. So somehow that gave me my first strike. So then came the events of January 6th. I recall that morning I watched the president's speech, and I thought that it was a very inspirational speech, and definitely nothing about the speech would have incited any sort of violence. I was very surprised when I got home later that day to find out all of the chaos that had happened, and all of the violence, and that a police had shot one of the Trump supporters. I looked at more of the evidence, and I could see that there was agitators within the crowd, and that they were dressed up as Trump supporters, but they were not your typical Trump supporter. Now, I don't know if they thought that I was glorifying violence in my post or any of my comments. I absolutely was not. I do not condone any of the violence that occurred that day. I made the post, Trump supporters' lives matter, because when I saw that Ashley Babbitt was shot by a police, I thought there should be no difference in the loss of her life over any of the other ones that we rioted and protested over all summer during the BLM riots. In fact, it is hypocrisy not to treat her life the same as those lives. So I believe that my standpoint went against their narrative, and I was not the only one that got shut down that day. On January 7th, there was a big wave of accounts canceled on Twitter and Facebook, and I was one of them. And the funny thing was, I found several other people who were canceled who also created new accounts. And it was interesting because we found each other. It was a way of uniting because we believe in freedom of expression. And it's good for us to find each other because we're the ones that can help to make sure that our freedom of speech is protected. So once I was canceled, I started to create new accounts. I wanted to find out what would it take, what was the least amount I could do in order to get canceled again. So I started to create accounts, and I was able to get 4 accounts canceled within 1 to 2 days. And the first thing I did was I would share my post, and I believe that got me my first strike, even though they didn't communicate with me about the first strike. But once I would say something about Trump supporters being peaceful and that Antifa was the ones that started the riots, then I would get suspended again. So that happened 4 times, 1 to 2 days. I created a 5th account, which was my 6th overall. And that one, it was interesting. It was actually kind of funny. I got a notice that within my first day, I had posted 5 posts or comments that went against their community standards, but yet they didn't shut that account down. And another interesting fact, when I was creating these new accounts, by the time I got to my 3rd or 4th account, my computer wouldn't allow me to create another account, so I had to turn to my phone for creating more accounts. So I just kept this going so I could at least gather the data about what it is that I did in that instance. And it just goes against their narrative. They're trying to paint Trump supporters as violent, which is not the case. So what's next? With more and more censorship going on in our world, I think the answer is more patriotic voices. We need to stand up on our own platforms and express ourselves freely. We don't need to be censored by fact checkers on Facebook. We don't need to be labeled on YouTube. We can join together and we can find a common good, because there is good in the world still. This is a battle of good versus evil, and you can choose which side you want to be on. And I know that the patriots are on the side of God, and that's the side that I want to be on. And I hope you do too. So what I'm going to do is start this channel. This is my platform to express myself freely. I've been thinking about this for a while, and it's taken a lot of courage to get to this point, but I think with the recent censorship, it's time to stand up and use my voice to try to tell truth the way I see it. I'm going to be recording my own videos and posting them to platforms that still support freedom of speech, such as Rumble and BitChute. So what kind of topics are we going to cover here on Neowolf News? If you notice my logo, it's got a medicine wheel with the 4 directions represented by 4 different colors. This is going to be the container that contains all of the topics that we discuss on this channel. To the north is the color blue, and that's going to be the technology section. At first, what I'm going to do is turn the camera around so I can show some of the behind the scenes of what it takes to put on a production like this. We can look at the cameras and lights and microphones and software so that you can do a production like this yourself. In the east section is the color yellow, and this section is the health and humor section. I'll be getting a little bit more into health in the future, but I do think that it's important to focus on humor. And even though we're going through a lot of difficult times, I think it's important to find opportunities to laugh, and especially to laugh at ourselves sometimes. In the south is the red color, and this is going to be the history and news section. I'm interested in true history. I want to get to the bottom of what's really happened in our history so that we can frame talking about our current events. I realize that this may be some fringe theory. I don't really want to get deep into conspiracies. I mean, if they're true, let's listen to them. If there's facts, let's bring it out, because I realize that the facts lie outside of the mainstream narrative. And then finally, in the west is the black color. And this is where I'm going to talk about my journey and my experiences leading up to this point. So if you enjoyed this show and you want to follow along on some of these topics, you can follow me on social media at NeoWolf News. I've got a Facebook account, Twitter account, Gab account, as well as YouTube, Rumble, and BitChute. Not sure how long I'm going to last on YouTube and Twitter, so you can subscribe while I last. But I'm pretty sure that with some of what I want to talk about, it's likely going to get censored, so I'm going to continue to host and post to the platforms that support free speech. So thank you, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.